Living in Scottsdale, the heat is a physical presence that you have to respect. You step out of the air conditioning of your house or your car, and it hits you like a solid wall. The desert environment teaches you very quickly about the mechanics of flow and the danger of drying out. But a few years ago, right in the middle of a brutal July afternoon, I noticed something completely contradictory happening to my own body. I was sitting on my patio, the temperature was well over 100 degrees, and I realized my hands were cold. Not just cool to the touch, but fundamentally cold from the inside out, as if the blood had simply decided not to make the trip all the way down the pipeline to my fingers. It is a very strange and unsettling thing to be sitting in a climate that bakes the ground solid, and yet feel a chill deep inside your own extremities. I ignored it at first, of course. We all ignore the early warning lights on the dashboard. We convince ourselves that if we do not look directly at the failing gauge, the engine will somehow keep running on willpower alone. I was in my late 50s at the time, still traveling heavily and managing a very demanding career in corporate sales. I was the guy who could walk into a hostile boardroom in Chicago, read the tension in the room, close a difficult contract, and fly back out before dinner. I prided myself heavily on that specific kind of relentless vitality. But slowly, over the course of a few years, that aggressive vitality was being replaced by a heavy, muddy, sluggish feeling. I found myself getting winded doing simple tasks that never used to require a second thought. It was not the kind of tired that a good weekend of sleep fixes. It felt like I was operating a heavy machine that was permanently restricted, running on half power regardless of how much fuel I tried to put into it. My thinking during afternoon meetings was getting foggy. I was drinking more coffee, trying to force the system to wake up, but the system was simply refusing to cooperate. And the failure of the system was not just happening in the bright lights of the boardroom. It was happening quietly and far more humiliatingly at home. When your body stops responding the way it has reliably responded for 4 solid decades, the silence that fills the room afterward is incredibly heavy. You find yourself lying there in the dark, realizing that the fundamental mechanics have failed, and you have absolutely no vocabulary to explain why. So you say nothing. You invent a phantom stress at work to explain the fatigue. You blame a complicated spreadsheet or a difficult client. You begin to manufacture arguments over trivial things just to create enough emotional distance so that the physical distance makes sense. I did that for a long time. I built a massive, invisible wall of work and travel to hide the fact that my internal plumbing was shutting down. I truly believed I was losing my grip on being a man, and the shame of that kept me completely isolated. Eventually, the chronic fatigue and the persistently cold hands pushed me into a doctor's office. I sat on the examination table, expecting him to find a major blockage. A clear and dramatic mechanical failure that could be repaired with a swift prescription or a surgical procedure. He ran the blood panels. He did the stress tests. A week later, he sat across his desk from me, looked at his tablet, and told me that my medical tests were completely normal. He leaned back in his chair and said I was just getting older. I remember walking out to the parking lot, getting into my car, gripping the steering wheel, and feeling entirely abandoned by the medical system. My tests were officially normal, yet my body felt like it was suffocating from the inside out because the circulation was so sluggish. That was the exact moment I stopped waiting for someone else to understand my infrastructure. I am a researcher by nature. In the world of high-level sales, you do not walk into a negotiation without knowing the absolute logistics of the company you're dealing with. I realized sitting in that parking lot that I knew absolutely nothing about the logistics of my own circulation. I decided to start reading. I bypassed the glossy fitness magazines and the superficial articles, and I started digging into the heavy, dense, unglamorous material about vascular health and how the male body actually ages. I learned very quickly that the issue was not that my heart had suddenly become weak. The issue was that the pipes themselves had become rigid. I had always thought of arteries and blood vessels as static copper tubes, just passive plumbing waiting for the pump to push fluid through them. But I discovered they are not rigid tubes at all. They are dynamic, living tissue. For blood to flow properly to your hands to keep your brain clear, or to create the massive hydraulic pressure necessary for a physical response in the bedroom, those vessels have to receive a very specific chemical signal to relax and widen. That vital signal is a molecule called nitric oxide. When your vessels receive that gas, they open up, they dilate, and blood flows freely to every organ and every tissue that is quietly begging for better circulation. The core mechanical problem I was facing was that my body was no longer producing enough of that signal. Without enough nitric oxide circulating in the system, the vessels naturally tighten. The internal traffic jam begins. The energy drops, the thinking fogs up, and the physical response simply vanishes. And the tragedy is that most men, exactly like I did, just blindly blame these changes on age. We accept the tightening of our infrastructure. We accept the loss of physical response. We accept the cold hands as our new normal, but looking at the mechanics of it, I realized it was not an inevitable decline of aging. It was a severe structural deficiency that my system had been desperately trying to warn me about for years. I was starving the biological factory of the raw materials it desperately needed to produce the relaxation signal. I assumed the solution to this would be some highly complex, expensive synthetic compound. It wasn't. The raw materials my failing infrastructure actually needed were hiding in plain sight, sitting in things you probably walk past in the grocery store every morning or ignore in the back of your kitchen cabinet. Seeds. It sounds almost insulting when you first hear it. I was dealing with a massive, devastating loss of physical confidence and marital intimacy, and the biological research was pointing me directly toward bird food. There is a seed so small you could hold 1,000 of them in the palm of one hand, which looks like absolutely nothing. Yet cardiovascular researchers view the concentrated natural compounds inside it as a major nutritional discovery. The first piece of the pipeline I had to understand and repair was the inflammation. That led me straight to the flaxseed. The clinical data showed it is perhaps the most important food in existence for the health of your arteries. My internal pipes were inflamed and restricted by 30 years of corporate stress, adrenaline, and eating terrible food in airport lounges. Flax seeds are incredibly rich in a specific plant-based omega-3 fatty acid called alpha-linolenic acid, which directly reduces the inflammation in the delicate cells lining the blood vessels. Think of it as a cooling agent for an overheated engine block. By systematically reducing that internal heat and friction, the vessels are able to produce nitric oxide far more efficiently. But the mechanism of the flaxseed goes much deeper than just cooling things down. They carry an extraordinary concentration of compounds called lignans, containing hundreds of times more of this substance than other plants. When these lignans hit your gut, the bacteria there convert them into bioactive compounds that have a direct, powerful relaxing effect on the vessels, while also acting as intense antioxidants. They act like a protective chemical shield, preventing the nitric oxide from being immediately destroyed by the free radicals floating in your system. They keep the vessel lining healthy, slick, and highly responsive. I read about a landmark clinical trial where men using daily ground flaxseed saw reductions in their blood pressure that were among the largest ever observed for any dietary change. But here is the mechanical catch, and it is something I got completely wrong during my first week trying this. You cannot just eat flax seeds whole. The outer shell of a flaxseed is so incredibly hard that it resists human digestion entirely, meaning if you swallow them whole, they pass through your body completely intact, and you get zero benefit. You have to break the shell to access the payload inside. I went out and bought a small, cheap coffee grinder specifically for this singular purpose. I learned to grind them up to unlock the benefits, and I quickly learned you have to store them in a sealed container in the refrigerator to keep the volatile oils from spoiling. I started putting 1 to 2 tablespoons of this ground powder into my meals every single day. Cooling the pipes down was the crucial first step, but it was not enough to restore the hydraulic pressure. The pipes were still physically tight and rigid. They needed to be forced to relax their grip. That is where I discovered the heavy mechanical function of the pumpkin seed. Your blood vessels need support from multiple directions, and pumpkin seeds are one of the absolute richest food sources of magnesium available anywhere. In the biology of your heart and your plumbing, magnesium matters enormously. It acts inside your body as a natural calcium channel blocker, which is the exact same mechanism used by an entire class of heavy prescription blood pressure medications. When you do not have enough magnesium in your system, calcium floods into the smooth muscle cells of your arteries completely unchecked, which causes excessive tightening and severe constriction of the vessels. It is the biological equivalent of driving a car on the highway with the parking brake pulled all the way up. The engine has to work twice as hard just to move forward. But when your magnesium levels are adequate, that calcium entry is properly regulated, allowing those muscle cells to finally let go, to relax, and for the vessels to open wide. A very small amount of pumpkin seeds, just a quarter cup serving, provides nearly half of the entire magnesium requirement your body needs for the day, which is remarkable for such a small volume. Furthermore, those same pumpkin seeds deliver a significant payload of zinc, which is absolutely required for the proper function of your body's most important internal antioxidant enzymes. This specific enzyme is the one that neutralizes the exact free radicals that are most responsible for destroying the nitric oxide in your vessels. The way I came to understand it was simple. The flaxseed helps your body manufacture more nitric oxide, while the pumpkin seeds help your body actually keep it in the system long enough to do its job. I remember standing in my kitchen a few weeks into building this strange new routine. My wife Alyssa was watching me load these seeds into the small coffee grinder. Alyssa is an incredibly direct woman, an ex-interior design consultant who possesses a level of emotional honesty that completely dismantles my old corporate defense mechanisms. In the past, if she asked me what I was doing with a grinder full of seeds, I would have made a sarcastic joke, deflected the question, or quickly changed the subject. The sheer shame of admitting to my younger wife that I was actively trying to fix my failing blood flow and my inability to perform would have been far too high to bear. But taking control of my own infrastructure, finally understanding the mechanics of my failure instead of just fearing it, had given me a strange, quiet kind of peace. I stopped the grinder, looked at her across the kitchen island, and I just told her the absolute truth. I told her that my circulation was failing, that the internal plumbing was incredibly tight, and that I was trying to give the machine the raw materials it was missing to loosen up. She did not laugh. She did not judge me. She just nodded and poured us both a cup of coffee. The truth is, when you stop hiding the mechanical failure from the people you love, the emotional weight of that failure drops by half instantly. The third element I added to this protocol came from a biological pathway that genuinely surprised me: watermelon seeds. We spend our entire lives diligently spitting these seeds out or throwing them in the trash. But the research showed me that they contain a specific amino acid called citrulline, which the nitric oxide system in a man's body desperately needs to function. Citrulline is a direct precursor to arginine, which is the actual raw material, the base fuel that your body uses to manufacture the gas that relaxes your vessels. What fascinated me most about this was the logistical efficiency of it. If you try to take an arginine supplement directly, which many men do, those nutrients are often broken down and destroyed by the enzymes in your gut before they ever have a chance to reach your bloodstream. Consuming citrulline is actually vastly more effective at raising the blood levels of these vital nutrients because it bypasses that digestive breakdown process entirely. It sneaks past the guards in the gut, resulting in much higher and more sustained levels of the exact fuel your blood vessels require to open up. I started buying them roasted, eating them as a quick snack in the afternoon, or just throwing them right into the grinder with everything else to supply that production pathway with essential fuel. As I slowly built this system, I realized a fundamental truth about maintenance. It is entirely pointless to clean out a pipe and restore the flow if you leave the metal completely exposed to rust and future damage. I needed to protect the repairs I was making. That is where I looked at the ancient compounds found in the sesame seed. Sesame seeds have been studied extensively for long-term cardiovascular health because they contain a totally unique compound called sesamin. Sesamin is incredibly special because it does not just act as an antioxidant that fights free radicals directly. It actually goes deeper. It strengthens your body's own internal antioxidant defense systems from the inside out. Instead of just adding external help that eventually washes away, sesame actually trains your biological factory to protect itself more effectively on an ongoing permanent basis. It actively reduces the oxidation of the harmful cholesterol particles, which are the exact particles most responsible for damaging the delicate lining of your vessels. And in a remarkable piece of biological synergy, research shows that sesame enhances the bioavailability of vitamin E in your body. It achieves this by slowing down the enzymes that normally break vitamin E down, ensuring that your vessels stay protected for a much longer period. To fully capitalize on that specific mechanism, I immediately brought in the fifth seed, the sunflower seed. This seed is an absolute powerhouse of vitamin E. A single serving of sunflower seeds provides over 80% of your entire daily requirement for this primary fat-soluble antioxidant. Vitamin E is the specific shield that protects the membranes of the endothelial cells, the cells that line your blood vessels and directly regulate your blood flow. When you strategically combine the sunflower seeds with the sesame seeds, you create a powerful chemical synergy that vastly exceeds what either seed could possibly provide on its own. You are laying down a permanent anti-rust coating for the entire pipeline. But there was still one final massive leak in my system that I had to patch. And honestly, it was the hardest one for me to face because it required looking in the mirror at how I chose to live. My lifestyle was destroying my plumbing. I had spent over 30 years swimming in the deep end of corporate stress. The biological reality is that when you are stressed, your body releases hormones that send a direct, urgent chemical signal telling your blood vessels to constrict. It is an ancient survival mechanism designed to protect your core organs during an attack. But when you live in a constant state of low-grade panic over sales quotas and delayed flights, those constriction signals stay elevated permanently. Even if you repair the endothelium, even if you feed the system citrulline, and even if you produce enough nitric oxide, the chronic stress signal can completely override the relaxation. It forces the doors closed. This is the exact reason why poor circulation is so common in men over 50, even the ones who seem to do everything right. Their stress response system is chronically activated. To fight this, I found the celery seed. Celery seeds feature a mechanism of action that is so totally unique, it specifically targets the physical effects of a high-stress lifestyle. They contain a compound called 3N-butylphthalide, which works completely differently than any other nutrient I had looked at. This compound specifically and directly counteracts the blood vessel tightening that occurs when those stress hormones scream at your vessels to constrict. It neutralizes the stress-driven vessel constriction, helping to tip the biological balance back in favor of openness and unrestricted flow. Clinical research has actually demonstrated measurable improvements in blood flow markers when men use these seeds as a spice or brew them as a tea. It is the biological equivalent of having an override switch for the emergency lockdown sequence. I did not try to manage all these different seeds separately. If a maintenance protocol is too complicated, you will abandon it in a week. I created a clear, simple plan that addressed my failing circulation through 6 different pathways simultaneously. I took the ground flax seed, the raw pumpkin seeds, the roasted watermelon seeds, the sesame, and the sunflower seeds, and I combined them all into one single sealed container that sits in the door of my refrigerator. I know that the flax supports the production and cuts the inflammation. The pumpkin relaxes the vessels and protects the gas with zinc. The watermelon feeds the raw pathway. The sesame strengthens the internal defenses. The sunflower protects the membranes. And the celery counteracts the daily corporate stress. No single pill or isolated approach can address all those pathways at once, but a daily blend of these 6 covers the entire board. I take a tablespoon or 2 of this blend every single day. I do not obsess over it. I do not track it on a spreadsheet. I just quietly do it, week after week. Consistency is where the actual results live. These compounds do not work like a sudden jolt of electricity. They work by gradually, quietly shifting your body's internal chemistry back in a favorable direction. The changes did not happen overnight, but I remember vividly, a few months into this quiet routine, walking out to my car on a cold desert morning. I gripped the steering wheel, and for the first time in years, my hands felt warm. The blood was finally reaching the very end of the line. Within a few more weeks, I noticed that the suffocating afternoon fatigue was gone, and my energy was steadily returning. And eventually, the physical response, the hydraulic pressure that I thought I had lost forever, quietly came back to life. The tension was gone. The pipes were open. I look at my son Ethan now. He is 31 years old, grinding his way through commercial real estate, living on poor sleep, caffeine, and massive amounts of stress. He thinks his body is an unbreakable machine. I see the exact same tension in his shoulders that I used to carry. I do not lecture him about his health. I just tell him the truth about what happened to mine. I tell him that if he does not maintain his infrastructure now, the pipes will eventually close on him just like they did on me. We spend so much of our lives believing that feeling broken is just the mandatory price of getting older. We accept the fading energy and the failing mechanics because we are too proud or too ashamed to look under the hood. But what I discovered is that your body, whether you are 60 or 80, has not given up on you. It is still fighting an invisible battle every single day to deliver oxygen, nourishment, and vitality to every part of you. It just needs you to stop ignoring the warning lights. It needs a little more intelligent support from your kitchen to change how your blood flows and how your energy feels. You are never too old to have better circulation, and you are never too far gone to fix the mechanics. Keep the pipes clean. Respect the pressure of the environment. Stop hiding the failure and start doing the quiet, unglamorous work of daily maintenance. The heat is fully up here in Scottsdale now, and I have a long walk to take before the day really starts. Take care of your infrastructure. We will talk again soon.